All right. Good afternoon. I'm here today to give a final update on the officer-involved shooting that occurred on November 7th, 2024. First and foremost, our thoughts remain with the family involved in this incident and all that have been impacted by this tragedy. As you are aware, a thorough investigation into this incident was independently conducted by the Eastern Jackson County Police Involved Investigation Team, otherwise known as PIT. At the conclusion of the investigation, the case was submitted to the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. They carefully reviewed the case and applied the legal analysis to the facts and evidence submitted to them. The criminal investigation concluded last Friday with the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office finding that no charges were appropriate in this case. Now that the criminal investigation has reached a conclusion, the administrative investigation has commenced. I can release today that the three officers involved in this incident were Officer Jordan White, Officer Chad Cox, and Officer Derek Carr. Officers White and Cox are the officers that are seen in the video that has been released, and Officer White is the one that fired his weapon in response to the threat presented to him. Officer Carr was responding inside the apartment with a mental health co-responder that is assigned to IPD at the time the shooting occurred. Officer White has 17 years of law enforcement experience and over 4 years of that with IPD. Officer Cox has 23 years of law enforcement experience, with over 10 years of that being with IPD. And Officer Carr has 2 years of law enforcement experience, all with IPD. As of today, all three officers remain full-time employees of the Independence Police Department. Officer Carr has returned to full duty, while Officers White and Cox remain on leave. I have full confidence that both Officers White and Cox will return to full duty in the near future. As this is both an ongoing administrative investigation and a personnel matter, I will not be taking questions or discussing anything further about the personnel involved in this incident. With that being said, I will take any questions you have at this time.
When you watch the video, what do you see?
I see officers that are presented with a deadly threat. I think that is very evident with the knife that was presented and moving towards them, and I see their response to that threat in accordance with how they're trained.
Justified? Shooting was justified?
Absolutely justified,
And why?
yes.
Why would you say that?
Because that knife, regardless of what the commentary has been surrounding that incident, is a deadly weapon. That we have people that are killed with knives often, and that is a deadly weapon which justifies the use of deadly force. As I've said many times, I have never met in my entire career a police officer that signs up to be a police officer and serve their community that is looking to take a life. Unfortunately, that is the sad reality and the very stressful and demanding jobs that we ask these men and women to do each and every day.
Chief, listening to that answer, understanding the law and your jobs, of course, a woman and an infant were killed. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. How can that be justified?
Because that woman retrieved a knife that was concealed inside of that apartment that she knew. She put herself there if you watch that video, the officers actually tried to prevent her from going over there. She retrieved that deadly weapon and she charged at the officers. Those were her decisions. And I am very, very sad that those decisions were made, but those were hers and hers alone.
When you see the unedited portion, it looks like maybe after a shot that the knife is dropped, maybe. What is the protocol around shooting while a suspect has been disarmed or someone has been disarmed and the weapon has been dropped?
So in law enforcement, we shoot in response to deadly force to stop the threat, to neutralize the threat. If you watch that video, the full video, from the time that she retrieves that knife to the last shot that is fired is 4 seconds. From the time the first shot is fired to the time that the last shot is fired is 2 seconds. So I understand that when you slow it down and you look frame by frame, you think, okay, well, isn't there a point here where, one could say, hey, there's no longer a knife here. In reality, that doesn't happen in real time. That's who we are as human beings. Again, we are not robots. We're human beings. We have a brain. We take situations and stimulus that are presented to us and we respond to that.
I got a question for you, Chief.
Sure.
Why did it take months for you to, as you did today, identify the officers involved?
That's just normal protocol for us as far as protecting their due process rights. There was also some surrounding threats that were made regarding this case, as you may or may not be aware, from outside forces within the community. So in an effort to protect them and their families, that was why.
Has Officer White had multiple stints with Independence Police or just one?
Correct. Officer White has had 2 different stints. This is his second stint with IPD, as well as Officer Cox as well. And then Officer Carr, this is his, he was hired and sent to the academy by the Independence Police Department.
And did he leave this department under his own volition, and was he terminated from any other department prior to returning to Independence?
Again, I'm not going to comment on any other personnel issues beyond what I've told you so far.
You said Officer White, 4 years with IPD, is that both terms?
Correct. Yep. Both
Combined?
stints combined just over 4 years, and Officer Cox, out of his 23 years, just over 10 years with
And they are
IPD.
still on leave pending the administrative investigation?
They're pending. They're on leave, getting the support that they need. But again, as I've stated, I have the full confidence in both of them that they will return at some point in the future.
And who's conducting the administrative investigation?
Our internal affairs unit, as is customary in all administrative investigations. So an administrative investigation looks to make sure that policies and procedures were followed, identify any training issues, equipment needs, or ways that we could do things better, improve. That's the purpose of the administrative investigation.
And we had a similar press conference the day after this shooting. You said right then and there that you wanted this to be a transparent process. With the way that things have played out, the releasing of the edited body camera video, do you believe that you have been as transparent as you could in this process? And would you have done anything differently in retrospect?
The short answer to your question is no, I wouldn't have done anything any differently. I know you guys keep referring to it as the edited body cam video. It was very clearly stated that it was clips. They're not edited in terms of one thing over another. Just to be very candid and frank, we had to balance inaccurate information that was being reported in the community with none other than, I'm sure, the best of intentions, which is fine. We had to counter that versus the reality that a family is dealing with the death of a mother and a child. And out of respect for that, that is why we didn't show in its entirety. Not to mention, we're not going to put out an hour-long video or do anything that's going to jeopardize the investigation as it unfolds.
Can you clarify where she was shot?
I cannot, as we stand here today, but I know that she did have wounds. That all will be released in the full report from the medical examiner's office.
I want to be very clear. There's been some talk about her turning around, right? And
Sure.
video out there as well. Was the first shot, did the first shot hit her while she was facing the officer?
Yes, and the other part of that, and I understand, and I've heard that commentary as well. Again, I know it seems nuanced or very technical, but when you think about 2 seconds, I mean, that's what we're talking about, 4 shots. The officers, there is nothing that they can do, none any of us in this room can do to counteract the physical forces against a body that has been shot. So it is perfectly explainable that as a body is shot, that it will turn, fall. All of those things are scientifically plausible and outside of the control of the officers.
Case law seems to be clear on hindsight as well, right? Like this idea that we can't go back in hindsight and pick apart something and then, charge an officer based on hindsight. And
So
can
the
you-
one
can you
you're-
explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. The case that you're referring to is Graham versus Connor, and that is the case that we use when we analyze any use of force as to the reasonableness of that use of force. What that case states is that the actions need to be objectively reasonable to a similar officer given the same set of circumstances without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight. The reason why the court, in my opinion, and what has been explained, I'm no legal scholar by any means, why that definition is there is because we are making split-second decisions. And so when you are looking at was the use of force reasonable, objectively reasonable, in other words, would a similar officer in the same set of or similar circumstances reasonably come to the same conclusion or action, if you hindsight, and again, when we talk about, the knife or dropping the knife, that's the hindsight definition. I was asked previously, could circumstances been different? Of course, any loss of life is tragic, and we don't go into any situation wanting or desiring there to be a loss of life. That's not why we sign up to do what we do. We're out there protecting our community, saving lives. And so we use that case and that standard, and why it has been upheld is so that we can continue to go in and do that job, regardless over time, making sure that we are doing best practices and improving and all of those things, but doing it within the consistent standards that are set and upheld by the courts.
Is there anything you could have improved, where officers could have improved in the way, in the time leading up to this incident, right? The idea of a mental health professional maybe intervening sooner, that type of thing.
Great question. Not in this scenario, and here's why. If you look, these officers, and I said this probably not as candidly as I am today on the Friday after, which is that they responded and their actions were absolutely in accordance with their training. If you look at this incident from the entire body cam, they spent over 11 minutes trying to de-escalate and essentially negotiate with this woman who was nonverbal. Going back to the initial incident, why they were there, they got called to a domestic violence assault. There was no indications of any sort of mental health intervention or any sort of mental health crises or any indications of that when they were called there. Similarly, we have three co-responders, mental health co-responders on varying shifts that are actually embedded here with the police department. We have 230 officers. It is absolutely not feasible that a mental health co-responder will be on every single call that we go on. It just isn't, that's not practical. So in this case, why I say no is because you had these officers that had the wherewithal to not only de-escalate while they were there and try to negotiate the child's safe removal from the mother to get the child out of harm's way multiple times. You then had them realizing that this was not going, at least according to what they had initially hoped. She wasn't responding in the way that they were instructing her to respond. Thus, they staged fire and EMS personnel, just in case, and then ordered a mental health co-responder, which all happened simultaneously as they're still dealing with this incident. So they put the right contingencies in place that were appropriate for this type of a call. Unfortunately, it just takes that response time, and again, 11 minutes, 12 minutes, to get from wherever the mental health co-responder was with that officer, in this case, Officer Carr, to get to that scene and get into the apartment. And they were walking into the apartment when the shooting occurred. Additionally, one more, I'll just clarify this and then I'll be happy to take it. The other piece of that I think is really important for the community to know is that these co-responders are not sworn personnel. They're not uniformed personnel, they are civilians and they are unarmed, and we have a responsibility to make sure that any situation that we put them in is a safe scene. So we cannot just go in to an active threat and place an unarmed civilian in harm's way. Not only does that detract from our ability to handle the call because we have another individual that now we have to have care and custody and concern for, but also that's just part of our agreement with these agencies to be able to provide the important work that they do.
Having read the investigative file, and you just mentioned it as well, the co-responder and additional officer were seemingly walking into the apartment as shots were fired. So can you talk to me about the value add that a co-responder could have had in this situation and others?
They are extremely important in the work that we do. I mean, it's no secret that we have a mental health epidemic across our communities. I mean, that was probably never more glaringly obvious than, living through the pandemic. So it's just tough, and so anytime you have somebody that is trained that specializes in mental health resources and connecting those wraparound services that they have worth several networks and relationships to be able to provide those services and get people engaged and get them the help that they need, they are an invaluable resource to and really have changed the way we police all across our profession. So it is a huge value add. It's very, very important, and we are immensely respectful and appreciative of the work that they do here. Go ahead. Yeah, hold on just a second. Yep.
Unfortunate incident, obviously. The reason we're here is because a woman and her child was killed. I know Prosecutor Johnson's office, they extended some condolences to the family. Would you like to take this time right now to kind of add that human aspect and give a message to the family about how you feel about the situation?
I did that at the start of this, but yes, of course, I absolutely, our thoughts and prayers go out to this family. There are many that are impacted anytime there's a loss of life, and I understand that. Just as we talked about, from my standpoint, the officers didn't put themselves in that position. They were called there. Their family didn't put themselves in that situation either. They were, they're having to deal with this. Their lives are forever changed, and that breaks my heart. But that can also occur, and the officer's actions can be reasonable and justified at the same time.
The prosecutor's office determined the officer's actions were reasonable and justified, but she did say she wished things had been handled differently. In a previous interview, you said that you wish things had turned, or many people wish things turned out differently, but you don't deal in fantasy. Is there anything, including the officer's positions, or at this point, was it a textbook response?
Yes, I still will tell you, for all the reasons I've mentioned today, this is textbook. Literally, this is current best practice policing, which is not. We've evolved, over the last 20 years to all of the de-escalation techniques that we've employed, and this is exactly how those are employed. We don't get to dictate the outcome of that sometimes, and unfortunately and sadly and tragically, sometimes, a loss of life occurs. Just to clarify that statement, because I did see that soundbite and it was a little bit out of context. So the full context of that was me agreeing, of course I wish, just like anyone at this police department and anyone in our profession wishes that circumstances were different. However, a wish is a fantasy. We deal in reality. We get called to scenes and have a set of stimulus or a set of circumstances that we have to then analyze and respond to. And that is just reality. And that is the point of that. So I wasn't trying to disparage or diminish in any way the comment made by the prosecutor's office. I was just trying to explain the difference between, of course, we all share that sentiment, but that doesn't change the reality that we still have to go in and do our job.
So with you saying that the officers are justified, will any training be changed? I know you mentioned that they tried to de-escalate, but some of the things that they were saying to her weren't really de-escalating, saying things like, why are you being like this, and why are you being so difficult, things like that. Just will any training be changed?
So again, we will, that's part of the administrative investigation. We'll look for any training, but as I said before, we're not robots, we're human beings. And just talking to people, I expect that our officers and our personnel are professional, and I believe they were professional. Now, sometimes, as can be expected, you're going to hear coarse language or other things because we're human beings. This is a life and death situation, as we are here today because of. That comes with a certain response and an emotional response because we are human beings with emotions, with real, reactions, real-time reactions to things. So I'm not going to say that their training was, the things that they were saying. Sometimes we are very direct with people when we say, ma'am, please do this, sir, please do that. And why are you being like that? Sometimes it's kind of almost like parents dealing with, toddlers, and I don't mean that, again, as childish behavior, but that's kind of those tactics that are employed in just trying to have that conversation and resolve a situation.
Chief, you talk about, emotions, I'm so sorry. You talk about emotions, right? This idea that there were a lot of people affected that day, namely the officers who opened fire, one of the officer who did open fire. Has there been a moment for you where you've seen his emotion and the others that were in that room that has affected you deeply?
Absolutely. Obviously, my foremost care and concern always rests with our personnel. I know that this is a tough job that they do each and every day. It's tougher today than it was yesterday, and it'll probably be tougher tomorrow than it was today. I spoke to all three officers personally yesterday ahead of today's press briefing and spoke with them, and I can tell you that they're all strong, resilient. They're all doing as well as can be expected, but it does weigh on me. It weighs on me in a world in which we are that line to keep our community safe, and this job is becoming more and more dangerous. The year following where we lost one, I think about those things.
Is there anything that you guys have learned from this or are taking away for future instances like this?
Again, that'll come at the end of the administrative investigation. We got to we had to let the criminal side run its course, which it has, and we'll look at those things. If nothing else, it is a good training tool for us to use, at the shift level, to go out to all of our personnel that go respond to these scenes, to just, maybe they haven't been in a situation like this, so it's good for them to see how the officers responded, to have those discussions. And of course, those have gone on, no doubt, but now this adds a little bit more clarity or a little bit more tools that they can use using the video to kind of show and paint that picture of how that response is. But as far as overarching things, we'll look at that. If there's something to address, we'll do so at the end of the administrative investigation.
Do you think we know that police had been called to this apartment or for this family multiple times before? Were any of these three officers familiar with this family at all before this particular call?
Not to my knowledge. The previous calls I don't think involved these three officers. I'm not 100% sure on that, but not that I'm aware of as we stand here today.
Is there a timetable for the internal investigation? I know those can be.
They do. Yeah, it takes as long as it takes, and it just like a normal any other investigation, we follow facts and we conduct interviews and see where they go. So and that's where it's, go ahead.
Chief,
Sorry.
when can we expect the full video, full body cam to be released?
My understanding is it was out yesterday. Is that not accurate for you guys?
It is accurate.
For a few.
Out
For a few.
on one outlet.
Okay. We will. Yeah, but the fact that it's out there, we'll make sure we work to get the full video out there.
Is there any investigation outside the scope of that apartment in the response to this? At least a couple of residents reported that during that time, officers stormed in their apartments with guns drawn.
Yeah, that didn't happen. What you were seeing was surveillance footage from the responding officers. So in essence, the second wave that were responding to the radio call of shots fired. And at that point, again, that's all they know. They don't have any other response. So they are armed and have the equipment necessary to respond in. They weren't running into apartments. There was some confusion initially. The way that apartment building is set up, there are two apartments with the same numbers, one on the front, one on the back. So we did have officers that contacted the residents at the wrong, same numbered apartment, quickly realized that was not where it was, went out around and to the right apartment.
Chief, my last question.
Sure.
Talked to family today. They still don't believe the officers should be allowed to work, be allowed to get their job back, that kind of thing. I know it's really difficult. What would you say back to the family?
That's a tough one because I understand why they would feel that way. I understand how they look at this and it's more harmful because they feel like that this was not a just outcome because of the loss of life here that they're dealing with. And I do sympathize with that. My heart goes out to them. Unfortunately, that is not the world in which we live. There were a lot of indicators and factors that went into before a shot was fired, and that was not on the part of the officers, unfortunately.
Chief, yeah, I'm not let's go. But just because this circumstance was so unique, I mean, she's holding the child. White said that he thought she was using her as a shield. Can there be any restraint taught to deadly force in that aspect just because it's so unique? Like if a child is involved and someone has a weapon, can there be any kind of restraint? Of course,
that's an analysis that the officer goes through. That's a calculus that goes into their mind. But ultimately, you can still kill someone with a knife holding a child. I mean, that is so. That officer is entitled to defend themselves as well as other people. That's the nature of what we do. We don't expect them to go in and be murdered because there's a child present. Now, obviously, that's not as I stand here today. Do I think that Officer White was hesitant because there was a child there? Sure, I think you see it. His first reaction was to back up into the closet. He was trying to remove himself from that situation, no doubt probably impacted because there was a child present. But when faced with a life-threatening and imminent threat of death or bodily harm, he acted appropriately.
And has he said whether he was targeting center of mass?
He has not said that. I know that's probably where, Dave, where you're going. I know there's There's always conversations anytime we have any sort of especially an officer-involved shooting. How come you couldn't tase him? How come you can't, shoot him in the toe? That's not realistic. That's not how we're trained. When you are faced with deadly force, we respond accordingly in accordance with their firearms training and best practices, and that's exactly what they did.
The family was also alarmed that Officer White put on blue gloves, just kind of randomly. Just what is the tactic behind that?
That's just in case there's a medical side. Those are just normal, medical gloves. We have standard issue. Every officer has them. So there's nothing to the fact that they were blue gloves.
We know that there was an ongoing DSS case. Can you speak to your relationship with that system within the state of Missouri? How do you guys work together, and do you feel that that system failed this family?
I can't sit here and pass judgment on the Children's Division. I know that all law enforcement officers in the state of Missouri are mandated reporters. We hotline when we think that there is evidence or indications of any sort of child abuse, child neglect. And so in the previous calls where that was appropriate, that procedure was followed. What their protocols and procedures are and how they handle it from there on their side of things, I can't speak to. Thank you all.
Thank you.